Hi, in this video you will get a good overview of how you can use Pinegrow to work with your existing websites. We will assume that your website is stored on your computer in a folder that contains all the HTML, CSS, JavaScript files, images, and so on. In Pinegrow, project is simply a folder. So to open a project, just select Open Project and choose the folder that contains the project files. And with that, the project is open, and the first panel that we meet in Pinegrow is called the Project panel. It displays the structure, like the file structure of the project with folders and files. The orange files can be visually edited in Pinegrow. So normally these are HTML files, but if you use a kind of non-standard file extension, you can set that up in settings. And in Pinegrow, as a general principle, you can always click on things. So for example, clicking on folders opens the folder, clicking on a file opens it in Visual Editor, and you can also use the right click for extended options. We won't go into details, just remember that you can right click on elements in the panels or even on the page view to access many editing options. Index.html is now open in page view, and page view is not just a preview of the page, but it is fully editable. So clicking on any element will select that element for editing. One general principle to keep in mind is that Pinegrow is not a text editor. So it's not Word or Google Docs. So you can't just go around and, type and change text here and there. Pinegrow works with HTML structure. And here, if we switch into the tree panel, it displays the complete HTML structure of the document. And if we want to edit something, we select that element, and then we can either change the text, so edit text, or just double clicking on the element lets us then actually go and type and change the text. And then when we are done with editing, so by default this option is set, so whenever we then switch to another element, we go out of the text editing mode. So let me double click to go into text edit again. And if we disable that, then we can just click around and make changes by typing the text directly on the page. And when we are done, just click done to get back to the normal editing mode. We can do many things with selected elements. We can duplicate them, we can delete them, and again, right clicking on the element brings up the menu of all available editing operations, such as transform, that lets us change the tag like H1 to H2 and so on. Both the page and the tree panel are fully editable. So for example, if I select heading here, I can just move it into the tree into a different position, or I can move it up and down with these icons. To change images, you can just double click on the image or right click and then go image and either select a file from the computer or use the image browser that displays all images that are available in the project. To insert new elements to the page, use the Insert button that displays the library panel. It has a couple of tabs. The first one lists all available elements. My project uses Bootstrap, and therefore all the Bootstrap components are also listed alongside HTML elements. Here we can also insert code, that's very handy. And then here we have images. Some frameworks such as Bootstrap define blocks that are really great for quickly building a structure of the page, and then we can customize it. Also, Bootstrap components are here with all the, alerts, buttons, cards, with all components that are defined by the framework. And if this would be a plain HTML project without using Bootstrap or Tailwind, then we would just have a list and images. That said, we can freely load any website or a block collection library and then drag blocks, components from there to the page. Let me show you something kind of cool, unique feature of Pinegrow. So if I select these 4 cards and I'm holding down Command or Control to select multiple elements, and now if I go insert, and let's find alert and bring this here, the element gets inserted into all selected elements. And moving the elements within selected elements like alert, and let's take it above the heading, will move it in all selected elements. This is really handy if you want to do a change on a bunch of similar elements. So let's undo because we don't need the alert here. And going down, here we have a section that displays information about our fictional Arctic adventures. And it would be nicer to display this panel down here. Pinegrow, this is really easy. The tree panel gives us very good control over where we drop the element. So let's put it here. And then we have now empty column, which we simply delete. And let's make the column with information bigger because now we have more available space. And the column controls, that's not something that's part of, CSS. These are defined by Bootstrap. Instead of having to type all these hundreds of Bootstrap classes, Pinegrow lets us use them through these visual controls, such as on columns, we can resize them visually. And also in the element attributes, element properties panel, we have a collection of visual controls that lets us visually work with Bootstrap utility classes. And if our project would use Tailwind, then here we would have Tailwind visual controls. Of course, if we do not use Bootstrap or Tailwind, just plain CSS or our custom framework, then we will not have these visual controls here. But the element properties panel has 2 parts. The top part displays kind of general attributes such as classes, ID. We can give the element a name that is then displayed here in the tree structure, or the title, attribute editor. And then down here on the bottom part, we have attributes that are specific to the selected element. For example, image has source, alt text, width, height, and so on. Plus, we have here the visual controls for supported frameworks such as Bootstrap and Tailwind, if, of course, the project uses it. If we want to work with classes, we have the class tool here. So clicking on Add Class or Command L lets us easily, access and use all defined classes. We can also toggle a class by just clicking on it, and then we can see what's the effect of the class, and we can easily bring it back. So there are a lot of very useful tools in Pinegrow. And one very important feature is the ability to work with responsive designs. So let's change the device size. And now we are viewing the page on small screen. Make sure that everything looks fine. So here, for example, I would prefer these links to take up all available space. So I selected all of them. And then if a Bootstrap utility is available, then it makes sense to use that. So let's say width 100%. So now there it is. We can also open multiple page views, and that's super useful. So here, let's say we want to view this one on large and this one on small. And let's double click here to collapse the panel. This lets us edit the page while viewing it in two different sizes so that we can make sure that everything looks good. So for example, this part on mobile would be nice to see more of the picture, while on large screen there's already enough of it visible. So I opened the tree panel so that we can select the correct element. So let's do the section, and let's say height should be 100, like the full screen. Actually better to use minimum. And we can see that it looks okay on both the large devices and on mobile devices. Let's close the page view to have more space and move on to the next panel. And that is the style panel used for CSS styling. So element properties controls classes and attributes, and Bootstrap utilities or Tailwind utilities are classes, and that's why they are under element properties. But the style panel lets us work with CSS styling directly. So let's go up and select the H1. The style panel has a couple of tabs. The active tab shows the CSS rules that affect the selected element. And then the tree tab also shows the rules of the selected element, but it uses more advanced kind of tree-based controls that lets us easily edit all the values. So you can choose which one you prefer, it's up to you. And the best way to create a new CSS rule is first to just do the styling on the style attribute. And we can make sure that the style attribute is selected. And then down here we have visual editor with visual controls. And to set a color, okay, we could just use the color picker. But because our project uses CSS variables, it's better to use the CSS variable. And now we have here style attribute has color set. And if we want to create CSS rule, we just click on the plus icon and say create new rule. And this opens a very handy tool that helps us compose a selector for our new rule. And here we will say hero H1. So this rule will target all H1 elements within elements with the class hero. If we would have multiple style sheets, we would choose in which one we want the new rule to go, and then create. And here it is, our new rule that sets the color. And we can add new properties, for example, text decoration, text transform, uppercase. Or of course, we can also use the visual editor if we prefer that. It's up to us. In Pinegrow, there are usually multiple ways to do a certain task. And sometimes users say, oh, why don't you just have one way? Because then it will be easier to learn. But, each task is different and each person has their own preferences. So our approach is to provide multiple ways of doing something, and then you can decide which one to use. So for example, we set text transform through editing a CSS property here in the tree tab. We could also do it down here in the visual editor. We could go and edit the code of the rule and do it here. So there are many different ways, and you have freedom to choose which one you prefer. And the next step shows all variables, CSS variables, or if we would use SAS or less, then the preprocessor variables that are available in the project. And this is fully editable, so if we want to change like the accent color, we can do it here. And because all the rules use this variable, everything gets automatically updated. Okay, let's undo. Stylesheets dropdown shows all the style sheets that are included in the page. Some are kind of ignored by default so that they don't clutter up the CSS panel, like for example fonts and framework style sheets such as Bootstrap. And we can just click on the style sheet to open the whole style sheet in the editor. And again, we can select the rules to then you edit them in visual editor. And search is also very powerful. So let's say font to just display the properties that have to do with fonts. Style panel is very powerful. We cannot go into all the details now. If you want to learn more, you can just go here into help, show help bubbles, and then each panel gets a short description with the Learn More button that takes you to further documentation and tutorials about that panel. In Pinegrow, code editing and visual tools go hand in hand. Just now we saw multiple ways of editing CSS code. Can also display the code of the whole style sheet and edit it there. And the same goes for HTML elements. We can edit the code of the selected element, or we can edit the code of the whole page. Pinegrow also works with external code editors. We even have integration with VS Code that lets you edit the code in VS Code, and the changes are immediately reflected in Pinegrow without having to save anything. But even without that integration, if you edit files externally, Pinegrow will notice when they are changed, and it will reload them in the visual editor. And because Pinegrow works with normal HTML, CSS code, you can use it alongside other applications. You can use Git for source control. You can use various FTP clients to upload the files to your server, or you can use external code editors and AI agents to work on your project. I want to show you one more panel. It's here, Components panel. So this comes very handy when we have a project like this one, where we have kind of multiple pages that share similar or same UI elements. Every page in our project uses the same navigation bar with slight changes. So a page is highlighted. Here the nature is red, here itinerary is red. And it would be nice if we make a component so that whenever we do a change in the component, it will automatically be changed on sub pages as well. And with Pinegrow, that's very easy to do. Let's select the navigation bar and then say define component. Navigation ID. Navigation is display name. But we will also make some aspects of this component editable. So let's select all the links and then say define editable itinerary. But we won't make the content editable. We will just make the class active editable. This means that we can add the class active on the link, but everything else is set by the component definition. So okay, now every link has itinerary. We have to change that. So sports, nature, price. After doing any changes to components, we have to update the component. And let's also go to component definition and take photo of the component. And with that, if we go into Insert panel, into the List tab, our component shows up here. So the component is created, but like itinerary and nature do not use this component yet. They still just have the navigation code as it was before. So now I selected the navbar. I go into Insert, right-click on the navigation component, and say make selected element an instance of navigation. Done. So now the navigation here uses the component navigation, but itinerary is still marked as active because we made the class active editable on links. Let's do the same on nature. We select the navbar, go to library panel, right-click on the component, make selected an instance, close it. And again, this one is now also using the component. And if we now go and change the component definition, let's add home. So here it is. Let's say home. And this will then be home, not itinerary. Again, the active is editable. And let's check what is now here. Okay. It doesn't have active class yet. So now we did that. We changed the component definition. We now update components. And we now have the new updated component navigation bar on every subpage. And here on home, I just have to set the active class, editable properties, home classes active, so that here it is red. But on all other subpages, the active page is marked correctly. So this is really powerful for building complex websites that are easy to maintain. There is no need to use React, Vue, or any complicated, frameworks to have reusable components. So I just wanted to show you quickly that this feature is available and how it works. Okay, we covered a lot already. Let me show you some useful tools. So sometimes, you are editing element, but these blue borders and the menu gets in the way. Up here we have visual helpers switch that toggles the menu on and off. So the element is still selected, but the menu is hidden so that we can better see what we are doing. And clicking on drop down here lets us configure visual helpers. So for example, we can also show insert icons on every element. And then we also have shortcut Command T or Control T on Mac on Windows and Linux that lets us easily toggle the visual helpers. Another useful tool are test clicks, and when enabled, then clicking on the page will not select the element. Instead, we can interact with the page, so we can follow the links, or we can press, click on buttons without selecting the element. So we use this when we want to interact with the page itself and not let Pinegrow handle the clicks by selecting the elements. And next, we also have preview in browser that displays the selected page in the browser. Another useful feature is here, refresh page view. So sometimes if things get messed up, when we are editing the page on live preview, it can happen that the preview gets kind of messed up. And the first thing to try is refresh the current page view. This basically just reloads the page view in the built-in browser. So when it comes to hosting your websites, because Pinegrow projects are just HTML, CSS files, you have the freedom to host them anywhere. You can use FTP, Git, or any other way to deploy your project. And as a handy convenience, we have integration with Netlify. Here in the project tab, clicking on the project name shows the menu, and here we have publish. Already connected to my Netlify account. And Netlify is great for hosting simple static HTML websites. I think their free plan lets you use custom domains and host up to 500 sites or something like that. To publish the project, simply click Publish, and then Pinegrow uploads the changed files to Netlify, so it's really quick. And our page is now published and accessible on the internet. So that's the simplest way. If you don't have your own hosting provider yet, that's the simplest way to host your page from Pinegrow. The Pinegrow user interface is flexible. You can collapse panels, you can move them around, you can rearrange the workspace in whatever way you prefer. And if things get messed up, just go to Window menu, and here you can either toggle individual panels on and off. You can also restore the layout, or you can define your own layout and then switch between them, between layouts. So let's go back to the default. There's also a theme, dark and light. Personally, I prefer light, so that's what I use. Panels can be also floated, opened in separate floating windows so that you can move them around your screen or multiple screens if you have them. So this is a really powerful way to use, all screen real estate that is available to you. And to snap the panel back into Pinegrow, just close the floating window. So we have more panels we could talk about. So we have the design panel that lets you control the overall kind of fonts and colors of the project, but that's mainly used when starting a new project. And then next we have interaction that let you create animations and interactions on the page. WordPress lets you convert HTML project into fully featured WordPress theme. So with Pinegrow, you are not locked in. You can start with static HTML, and then later, if that's not enough, like if you want to make the page dynamic with a proper CMS, then you can activate WordPress support and you can add dynamic WordPress features to your project. And Pinegrow also comes with very powerful AI assistant that works with different AI providers and can even connect with AI agents such as Codex or Claude Code. And I really warmly recommend you. So we won't go into details here. This video is already quite long. And as said before, if you want to learn more, just go to the documentation side. We have many tutorials there, or show help bubbles, and then just learn more about the panel that you are interested in. I hope this video was useful and that you got a good overview of how you can effectively use Pinegrow to work on your website projects. Take care. Bye-bye.